the Philistine, Plishtim. Oh, I forgot the name in English. The Philistines, okay? And what does Plishtim mean in Hebrew? It means the people who came and conquered. Or invaded. They were invaders. So Hadrian wanted to humiliate the Jews by giving their country the name of the invaders that were always a thorn in their eyes, since King David and onwards. And in Christian Bibles, in the New Testament, or in the Old Testament also, you don't have the name Palestine. It's not in the Quran, it's not in the Torah, it's not in the New Testament, but it is on the maps in Bibles, New Testament Bibles. So therefore, when people spoke of Judea or Israel, or what was once the Jewish land, it all of a sudden got many names as Christianity rises to become a new religion. So sometimes it's called Judea, sometimes it's called Israel, sometimes it's called Palestine. And that is the reason that the mandate was called the Mandate for Palestine. We also have to remember, uniquely in the world today, many people say they are secular, they're a secular country. I come from Sweden, probably the most secular country in the world. And secularism, that is the odd one out. I mean, people in general in the world, they are believers, they are religious, they have some sort of belief or faith. And that was the norm. So when the British or with the League of Nations, when they sat down, people, it was a natural name to give this area. So it was called the Mandate for Palestine. Now, so the mandate is one of 16 mandates. And the unique thing about this mandate, and this is a legally binding document that cannot be changed today, it has a few things that cannot be changed today. And one of them is the Balfour Declaration is incorporated into the mandate, meaning we have support. Israel has support for recreating a Jewish national home for Jews outside of Israel as well, Jews all over the world. The mandate recognizes the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine, and in parentheses, Eretz Israel, Aleph Yud, that is the Hebrew name for the land of Israel. That is in the mandate. They cannot just say, we cannot have a Jewish state. I mean, there was a lot of talk about when Israel a few years ago enforced a law saying that this is a Jewish nation. So people were screaming, racism, discrimination. Not at all. This was part of the original mandate. The mandate commits to assist the recreation of a Jewish state for the Jewish people. So you cannot say that Jews who move to Israel are illegal, are illegal settlers, they like to call them today, because that is part of the promise that was given to the Jews. It will encourage and facilitate Jewish immigration. So not only will it help recreate a Jewish nation, it will encourage immigration to the new state. And very important, responsible for seeing that no Palestine territory shall be ceded to or placed under a foreign power. Meaning France or Canada cannot declare a state of Palestine on land that belongs to Israel. They did it, but it has no legal backing. But they did it. Of course, it created a lot of. Sweden did it in 2014. This is legally binding in the mandate. Now, what were the borders? The borders were, as you see on this map, the brown reddish area here. Now that is quite a larger size than the actual Israel that we have today. So remember, what the mandate said, that no one can change, no land can be ceded to a foreign power. But this, of course, was opposed by the Arabs all over, the Arab and the Muslims all over the world, especially in the Middle East. And they demanded of the Brits, who were given by the League of Nations, they were given this mandate to take care of it. So the British were in charge of the mandate for Palestine. The French were in charge of the mandate for Syria. That was later divided into Syria and Lebanon. The British were also in charge of the mandate for Mesopotamia. That became Iraq eventually, and so forth. So the Arabs pressured the British to cut out a large piece of the mandate for Palestine, and they did. And how come the Arabs had could enforce or could pressure the British to do this? Because this is exactly the time when oil becomes very important. And at this time in the 1920s, oil was found in the Arab world, in the Middle East. And of course, the British, they wanted to invest in oil. So they wanted to appease the Arabs as well. And that is why they, without shame, cut out 77% of the original mandate. So now, my dear friends, we have 2 British mandates for Palestine. But the thing is, this red piece here that was later renamed Transjordan, it was forbidden for Jews to move there. It was forbidden for Jews to work there. It essentially was Judenrein, which is the same name in German, Jew-free, that Hitler used a couple of years later. Jew-free, long before Hitler. And so the Jews were left with, 23% of the original mandate. And this happened in 1921, just 1 year after the mandate was created. And in 1923, you can see this little purple up here. That is the Golan Heights that was cut away and given to the French mandate for Syria. And that is why the Golan Heights became Syrian in 1923. So in effect, what we have, this is the mandate that you see here, the light blue. That is the mandate for Palestine given by the League of Nations from 1923 and onwards. Now, the League of Nations did not manage very well to keep peace on earth because Second World War breaks out. So after the Second World War, the League of Nations as an organization was dismantled. And another organization was created, and that was the UN as we know it today. Now, during the last meeting of the League of Nations, and this is the second document that is legally binding when it comes to the mandate for Palestine, meaning Israel, is that the members of the League now administering the territories under mandate, which the British were doing here, they have to continue to administer them for the well-being and development of the people concerned in accordance with the obligation contained in the respective mandates. So, all in all, I can say is that whatever obligations were not yet done from the League of Nations perspective were now handed over to the UN. And they were legally binding, just as legally binding as they were in 1920. So, and in order to avoid confusion, now we have the third document, the legally binding document supporting Israel, is the Charter of the UN. So just to make sure that no one misunderstood, the UN, when it was created in 1945, came into being in 1946, they wrote in their charter Article 80. It's officially or unofficially known as the Jewish People's Clause, and that preserves all the rights granted to Jews under the mandate for Palestine. So this is the second time a legally binding document, because the charter is a binding charter on all members of the UN, and all nations are actually members of the UN. So this is legally binding, and even even after the expiration of the mandate. So nothing could be done or changed of the original mandate, which was the blue map that I showed you before, which includes Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. It does not include the Golan Heights. So Israel, all the mandates around Israel, they became independent in the 1940s, and some of them in 1946, some of them in 1943. So we see here the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, 1946, Lebanon, 1943. So Israel, when they know that the Brits are leaving, the mandate, they're actually they're handing over the mandate. They don't want to take care of it anymore. It has been not a very peaceful thing. It has been lots of problems here with the Arabs attacking the Jews, because the Arabs never wanted the Jews to have this land. So they wanted to leave, and they set a date, and the Jews who were now organized, they had organized to build a state. And I want to emphasize, the Jews organized to build a state. They created a government that was not really yet a government, as they didn't have independence. The Arabs, on the other hand, never wanted this to be a state. The Arabs wanted this to be part of a greater Syria. So when Arabs during the mandate period, when they were referred to as Palestinians, because it was the mandate for Palestine, they said, no, we are Arabs, part of a greater Syria. The Palestinians during the mandate, they were the Jews. You had everyone who lived here was a Palestinian, and then it would say in the paper Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Druze, etc., etc. So in those days, during the mandate period, Palestinians, they were the Jews. Now it's really complicated, and the UN really doesn't want to, or the Brits really don't want to be here. So the UN decided in 1947 to send a delegation, a UN delegation, it was called UNSCOP, United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, to travel around and see what is the problem. Why is there no peace? I mean, we had Lebanon is already a state, Jordan is already a state. What's the problem with this, with the Palestine? So they traveled around and came up with a new idea. Let's divide the land a second time. And what was left now after this, this was a UN resolution. It was decided on in 29th of November, 1947. It was called Resolution 181, the UN Partition Plan. That was a suggestion. Now, UN resolutions are not legally binding. I want to emphasize. UN resolutions taken in the General Assembly, it's like you have a meeting and you sit down and you take notes, and it's a summary of the meeting. Now, so they came up with a resolution, which was a recommendation. It's a recommendation. And they said, okay, let's divide it. And I want to show you. So the green part here, that was to become Arab. And the blue part was to become Jewish. Now, 60% of the blue part was the Negev desert. And in 1947, believe me, that was only a desert, because it was very hard to get water down to the desert in those days. So, and the Jews accepted this suggestion. They said, this is better than nothing. The Arabs, on the other hand, and I'm talking about, when I say Arabs, it means it's not only the Arabs in Israel to become Israel, it's also the Arabs around Israel, the Arab neighbors. The Arabs did not accept this. They said no. Now, had the Arabs accepted this, we would have had two states celebrating independence on the 29th of November every year, one Jewish and one Arab. So this is, it's not the first time, but it's the most well-known suggestion to give the to give the Arabs their own state that they can call Palestine or whatever they want to call it. But they said no, and instead they started a war. They attacked the Jews, and we have what we call a civil war inside the borders of Israel. Now, so it was the Arabs inside of Israel, and it was also the Arab neighbors that sent militias, that sent terrorists, that sent soldiers to support this war, the civil war. And in the beginning, the Jews defended themselves, just like the IDF. It's the Israel Defense Force. We're not an attacking force, we're a defense force. So they defended themselves until there was a horrible incident where doctors and nurses from the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem were attacked. It was a convoy of doctors and nurses. They were attacked and they were all killed brutally. And then the Jews said, okay, this is it. We're not going to sit here and just being attacked and defend ourselves. Now we're going for the attack as well. And it was full-scale civil war. This was during the beginning of the 1948. And in 14th of May, the British soldiers from the Mandate, they left Israel, and Israel declared independence. And within hours, the country was attacked, within hours. Now, very important to say, because sometimes you will hear Mahmoud Abbas speak about the partition plan, Resolution 181. Let's go back to that. You cannot start war after war after war, lose each time, and then you want to start all over again and say no, but we lost the war, but we want to try it again. That's not how things work. So when they speak about Resolution 181 and the partition plan, those are the borders. That is not true, because then they refer to all of the Judea and Samaria. They refer to this part, Gaza, and part of Negev, and they refer to part of the Galilee as theirs. That's not true. They rejected that. And because of their rejection, the Arab rejection, Resolution 181 became totally irrelevant and has no legal standing whatsoever today. Now, the fourth document that will support Israel as it looks with Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, it is a customary rule called Uti Possidetis Juris. Now, what is that? What is this rule? It's a rule that has, as I say, it's a customary rule. So it's a rule that is accepted by most countries in the world, and therefore a rule that is used internationally. And I can say that the last time it was used in Europe, it was, if I'm not mistaken, when Yugoslavia fell apart and it was split into many different countries like Croatia, Bosnia, and so forth. So Serbia. So what is this rule? Well, this rule says the following: the borders of the new country, they are drawn according to the previous legal entity that ruled. So when Yugoslavia fell apart, it was divided into different areas. So therefore, it was not a problem to create Bosnia, Croatia, Serbia, and so forth. So the last ruling entity when it comes to Israel is the League of Nations mandate. And the League of Nations mandate is this. This is what we have, the white here. Oh, I see it moved. But it should be this white here, okay? Judea and Samaria are included. So only Israel can agree to take parts of that land and give to someone else. No one else can do that. I mean, no one's going to come to America. Mexico is not going to demand from America that, okay, we're taking a few states in the south and they are now Mexican. That has no legal support, just as well as no country can come to Israel and take parts of our land and say that this is a new land. That's completely not true. So the modern state of Israel is the third independent Jewish state in approximately the geographical area of its historical predecessors. And that, my dear friends, is absolutely unique in history. And then people say, oh, the Bible we don't, the Bible, I'm not a believer, or I'm a Muslim, I don't believe in the Bible. Well, the oldest text that we have in Israel that is from the Bible is 2,600 years old. Isn't that amazing? It was found in Jerusalem, and it's the Aaronic blessing. It's just fabulous. So this is the third. There has never, ever been anything like this in history. Like one country, we speak the same language, we believe in the same Torah, we have the same God, and we have the same geographical area. It's just amazing. It's an amazing feat. So what happened? Israel declared independence. We were immediately attacked. Now, in that attack, so we have to remember who was in Israel at the time. 600,000 Jews, many of them straight out of the Holocaust. They had numbers on their arms. They did not speak the same languages. And it is said that in the military, the IDF at the time, officers were given out orders in 7 different languages, Polish, German, Arabic, whatever. And because people just didn't speak, they didn't even have enough weapons. So 600,000 Jews, many of them straight out of the Holocaust. Of course, we have children and elderly also in this. So they managed somehow to defend Israel, and they came out winning this war, but they lost land. They lost land here, Samaria, Judea, and Gaza. I'm pointing with the arrow here. Now, it says here the West Bank. The West Bank is a political name from a occupier. It's Jordan who occupied Judea and Samaria. And from a Jordanian perspective, this became the West Bank because it's on the western banks of the River Jordan. Gaza was occupied by Egypt. And now, talk about wars. So Israel defended itself. Is that legal? Absolutely. In the laws of war, international humanitarian law, IHL, you are not only allowed to defend yourself, you actually have an obligation that if your country is attacked by another country, the country has an obligation to defend its citizens. It's like an unwritten contract. I live in Israel, and I take it for granted that if my neighbors here, I live on the Jordanian border, I can see Jordan from my window. If they attack me, I take it for granted that the IDF will come and defend me. And that is like a contract between the citizens of the country and the country itself. So it's not only legal, it's an obligation to attack a country like Jordan and Egypt and Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and also Saudi Arabia did. That is illegal. So we won a legal war where we defended ourselves, and we lost parts of Israel. So did those parts become Jordanian or Egyptian? Of course not. They were occupied by these two countries. And because no country in our neighborhood wanted to sign a peace deal with us, we did not have internationally acclaimed borders. Because to have that, your neighboring country has to agree to recognize that you exist and to recognize your borders, and they didn't. So we just had ceasefire lines. Now a ceasefire line, also here, when it comes to Judea and Samaria and Gaza, a ceasefire line is temporary until both sides eventually will sit down and decide on the borders. So in 1949, that did not happen. Now, this war that the Arabs started, it created 2 refugee floods. One was Jewish and one was Arab. So the Jewish refugees, very few people have heard of, unless they're really interested in Israel. So it was about 800,000 to 1 million Jews from the Arab world. Of course, there lived Jews in the Arab world. I mean, we can even read about Jewish refugees when they were taken to Babylon, even though that's not Arab, but they were taken to Babylon. So what was then Babylon later became Iraq. There have been Jews in Iraq for 2,500 years. Now, all of these people became refugees, and none of them were a threat to the country in which they lived, because they did not have equal rights. They didn't have any rights. They were dhimmi. They were second-class citizens. They were not allowed to carry arms. They were not allowed to defend themselves. So they were discriminated against in Islam, and they did not pose a threat to the government in which they had to flee from. Now, the Arabs, on the other hand, they posed a threat. The Arabs in Israel, some of them were expelled because they were actually posing a threat to Israeli security. Now, 70,000 Jews were ethnically cleansed from Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Ethnically cleansed. And this is 3 years after the Second World War, where 1/3 of the Jewish population was annihilated by the Germans. So Jerusalem became ethnically cleansed of Jews. Now, Israel, during this period of time, of course, took all those refugees, and they had to build. There were 600,000 Jews in Israel, and all of a sudden you get all this large amount of Jews. So they had to build. First, they lived in tents, and they lived in tents for a long time. Some for months, some for years. And then Israel built what we call mabarot, which is temporary housing, and they were not really very nice, but that's what we had. And the last mabarah was taken down in 1963. Have you ever heard about these people? Did they ever get their own UN organization? No, they didn't. The Arab refugees did. So the Arab refugees that became refugees because of the war they started and lost to the Jews, then the new organization, United Nations, registered 726,000 Arab refugees out of this conflict. And the Arabs fled to Gaza, to Judea, to Samaria, to Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Now, this number is completely wrong. 170,000 of those were unregistered immigrants, because what you have to understand is that since the creation of the mandate, since 1920, when the Jews started to come back here in greater numbers, lots of Arabs moved here too. They immigrated here. They came from the neighboring countries. Now, why on earth would Arab Muslims want to come and stay in a country that was to become Jewish? Because the Jews gave them better salaries, as we do still today. The Jews had better health care. Life was better with the Jews around than it was in their own countries that were now being emptied of Jews. So 170,000 of those so-called refugees were not refugees, because they could come back. They could go back to Jordan, to Egypt, to wherever they came from. 10,000, tens of thousands of them were nomads, meaning they moved around, and they were never refugees in the original sense. And refugees registered themselves several times at different refugee camps to receive benefits and food rations. So Muhammad could go to refugee camp 1, register, take all of his family, 10 people, and then go to refugee camp number 2, register again. So all of a sudden, Muhammad and his 10 people in the family became 20. And they did it then again. Then they became 30. So they could do this, and they were never taken off the list of the old camps. So the numbers were inflated enormously this way. The deceased people, they were not registered, just as Hamas failed to register people who died during this Gaza conflict. Now, 2 million people in Gaza, for 2 years, people die of natural causes. We have not had one registered person died of natural causes, according to Gaza Health Ministry. Of course not. It's Hamas who's giving out the numbers. So the real number of refugees at the time should have been 350,000. Now, how incompetent is this organization? The UN that could not take care of 350,000 refugees, today they are almost 6 million. When they took care of millions of refugees and the 14 million Germans that were moved around after Second World War. millions of people in India, Pakistan, millions of people in Southeast Asia, millions of people in Europe outside of the Germans. And they couldn't take care of 350,000. There must be a reason. And of course, there is a reason. So this, the UN, there are two refugee organizations, and one is UNHCR. It's a permanent organization in the UN, and it's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. It takes care of all refugees besides the Arab Palestinians. It solves problems. It has a staff of 19,000. It has had a staff of 19,000 for about at least 10 years. It works, when I took this number, it was in 2024. They worked in 137 countries. And at the time, a year ago, they took care of 122.6 million people that were fleeing their home. And they were either refugees across borders or refugees within their own country. The UNHCR is a permanent institution, but it takes care of the refugees to give them a temporary solution until they will reach another destination. UNRWA, United Nations Refugee Relief and Works Agency, takes care only, it's a very racist organization because it only takes care of Arab refugees out of the Palestine conflict, which they themselves started. So they speak of refugees from the 1948 war and Arab refugees, and from the 1967 war that they also started later on. UNRWA has a staff of 30,000 people. 12,000 of those are in Gaza or were in Gaza. They work in 4 different countries: Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. Now Israel has stopped working with UNRWA, but they are still present actually in Judea and Samaria. So in Gaza, I'm not really sure what the situation is, but 30,000 people taking care of from the beginning, 726 so-called refugees, 1,000, and now they're 5.9 million people. Now, UNRWA is subordinate to the UNHCR. It's a temporary institution, and it has to have its mandate renewed every 3 years. And right now, it has a mandate valid until 2026. Now, I want to tell you that in the 1950s, there was a similar organization created, UNCRA, that was for the Korean War. Now, they took care of about 15 million people. And after 10 years, less than 10 years, UNCRA ceased to exist. It didn't get its mandate renewed because it had solved the problem. UNRWA just creates more problems. And the UNHCR, how does it refine what is a refugee for the UNHCR? It's a person who has fled its country for a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. UNRWA defines a refugee this way: a person whose place of residence was the mandate for Palestine during the period of 1st of June 46 to 15th of May 1948. Meaning, you are an UNRWA refugee if you came to work in Israel between 1st of June 1946, 2 years before the war that they started. Then you become an UNRWA refugee rather than being an Egyptian or a Jordanian or whatever. And UNRWA also decides that children and descendants of male refugees, Palestine refugees, they will inherit their refugee status, meaning you are born a refugee. Now, this, my friends, is discriminatory towards the Arab Palestinian, if there is such a people that's called that. Today they are, but I mean, they don't have a history, ethnic history. It is very discriminatory against these people because they are born as refugees. They can never lose that status. The only way to lose your refugee status, according to UNRWA itself, is by dying. And this was this was told to a refugee in Canada who wanted to Palestinian refugee. He went up to UNRWA and said, "I don't want to be a refugee anymore. Take me off the list." And they said, "That's not possible. But I'm Canadian now. I have a job." And they say the only way you will lose your refugee status is to die. So it's a permanent thing, can never be changed. Now, 160,000 Arabs, of all the Arabs that were in Israel, stayed in Israel and did not fight against the Jews. Today, they of course became Israeli citizens. They are today 2 million people, actually 2.1. They're 21% of Israel's population, which is 10 million. And all of them, most of them are Muslims, the majority, but they're also Arab Christians. And then we have lots of different other minorities like Druze and others, Cherkessim and so forth. They have the same democratic rights as every single other Israeli, like Moti, my husband, or like me or our children. So the Israeli Arabs are the only Arabs in the entire Middle East who live in a democratic country, because there are no democratic Muslim countries. There are none. They don't exist. So here they have freedom of movement, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, etc., etc. Children have rights. Okay, so this is about the money. I'm actually going to skip that because in general, I can just say UNRWA has been draining the United Nations of money since its creation in 1949. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars invested in UNRWA and the so-called Palestinians. And today you might wonder, where has all the money gone? Now, we in Israel, we know where it went. It went to terrorism. Now, during 19 years of Arab occupation of Samaria, Judea, and Gaza, there was not a single word said about we want to be independent. We want to have a country called Palestine. There was not a day of peace. There were just attacks on Jews. There was not a word about a distinct Palestinian people demanding independence. Not a word about Jerusalem being the capital. And during this occupation, the Soviet Union and the Arab League created the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, to be a problem, a thorn in the eye, as part of the war against Israel, like not in all-out war, but through terrorism. So in 1967, all the Arab neighbors attacked Israel. It's called the Six-Day War. They lost big time. Within 6 days, tiny little Israel made a huge, I mean, they won. The victory is just like enormous. And it's a victory that is being studied in war studies until this day. So the Arabs realized it's really tough to win over the Jews by making war. Now, they made this war and they attacked and they lost Samaria, they lost Judea, they lost Gaza, they lost the entire Sinai Desert, and they lost the Golan Heights. So Samaria and Judea was retaken. Israel took it back. Gaza was retaken. Israel took it back. Israel occupied the Sinai Desert and occupied the Golan Heights. Now, I just want to the Russia's war on Ukraine. In 2014, Russia just went out and occupied Crimea. Now, Crimea is part of Ukraine. Crimea was occupied. Now, imagine if tomorrow the Ukraine will take back from Russia Crimea. Is the Ukraine going to be called an occupier of Crimea or a liberator of Crimea? It will be called a liberator of Crimea. And maybe some of the Ukrainians that were expelled from Crimea will move back to Crimea. That is what happened. That is not, I mean, that would be fantastic. So that is exactly what happened. When Jews moved back to Judea and Samaria and Gaza after Israel took it back. They were not occupiers. They were just Jews who came back home, sometimes even to the house they had before. Now, what Israel did after the Six-Day War is they offered Egypt back the Sinai. Actually, they offered the neighboring countries back all of what they had taken, even Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And they said, we give it back to you if you give us one thing, peace. The Arab countries sat down, they met in Khartoum, the Arab League, which is part of the UN, and they said, no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with Israel. So Israel kept the land it had taken in a war. Now, again, this war, I'm going back, this war, Israel was attacked. That is illegal. Israel defended itself. That is legal. Israel took these areas that they occupied because they needed that as a buffer zone. Is that legal? Well, yes, it is, until you sit down and have a discussion with, because if the country that you took that area from is still threatening your existence, you have to make sure that you will not be attacked again. So you take a buffer zone. Hopefully, you will be able to have a discussion with the country, but so far, not in 1967. Now, so sometimes people say, "Oh, but the settlers, they are." Do I still have time? The settlers are illegal settlers. Yes, yeah. Okay, so illegal settlements in Judea and Samaria, and they refer to a convention called the Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 49, which was written after Second World War in order to prevent what Hitler and Stalin did to people when they moved millions of people around as slaves or for extermination or for other purposes. And so the Palestinian side today, the Arab Palestinian side today, they say that this is what we, you're breaking this rule of law, but we're not breaking it, because Jews who move back to Judea, they're not being transferred by their government. They're not being forced to go there by their government. They go there by their own will, and they pay for the housing that they live in. So that is not illegal. It has now become accepted all over the world that it is illegal, but it's not. If you look at the actual legal documentation. 1967 to 94, we have lots of things: war of attrition, Yom Kippur War. We have a peace agreement with Egypt, which is legally binding, and we get the first recognized border, and we give back, for that peace, we give back the Sinai Peninsula. They did not want to have Gaza, so we kept Gaza. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s, where we agreed to recognize the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people, legally binding, everything that is written there. We have a peace agreement with Jordan in 1994, and then we have the second border officially recognized, and those are all legally binding. So Palestine, today in the UN, they actually refer to Palestine as the state of Palestine. That is all a sham. It's non-existent because Palestine is still on Israeli land. Now, PLO was recognized as the representative of the Palestinian people, according to Israel, and we signed agreements in the 1990s with them. Those agreements created the Palestinian Authority, the PA, and the PLO promised to make changes in its charter where it says we want to exterminate the Jews and to exterminate Israel. They never changed that charter. So we actually signed an agreement with a terrorist organization who wants to exterminate Israel and its people. Now, the Oslo Accords did not promise a state of Palestine. It only spoke of a peaceful solution between the parties, not an independent state. And that's what I want to talk about. That's the most important thing. All the problematic things like Jerusalem, border settlements, refugees, etc., were to be discussed in the future. They never were. The Oslo Accords still exist. Now, the Oslo Accords divided Judea and Samaria and Gaza, but Gaza is now in. I didn't bring Gaza here. I just brought this map. I call this the Oslo Pizza. It was divided into Area A, B, and C. Area A, which is the yellow, those are urban areas, and they're controlled solely by the Palestinian Authority. Area B are the brown areas. They're controlled by Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And Area C, which is the major part of Judea and Samaria, belongs to Israel. So if you want to build in Area C, you have to get a building permit from the Israeli authorities. And all the Jewish neighborhoods, all the Jewish settlements are in Area C. So they are in Israel. And the Arab settlements, they are both in Area C and in A and in B. Okay, I'm going over quickly here. So settlements, Arab illegal settlements, something you probably never heard about because they never talk about it in the media. There are EU-sponsored houses in Area C. The European Union is very much part of this problem. They have a secret plan how to take over Judea and Samaria. It's absolutely totally disgusting. They're going to, facts on the ground, build illegal buildings or help the Arab Palestinians build illegal buildings, and then just declare a Palestinian state with facts on the ground. And as of 2024, I was myself on a trip and witnessed this last summer, or this spring it was. There are 94,000 illegal constructions supported by the EU. So the EU is a political, is an enemy working here in Israel against the state. Now, so those are illegal. The EU-sponsored houses are illegal. Now the hilltop, about Jewish, okay? So the hilltop outposts, they are illegal. There are a bunch of people, they come to a hilltop and they declare this is now our land. Israeli authorities say, no, it's not. They send the military takes it down. And there is a legal procedure, but it's not accepted by the state of Israel. The other civilian presence, Jewish homes in Judea and Samaria, is completely illegal, just as any town or village in the United States would not be an illegal settlement. Now, in order for a country to be accepted as a country, a new country, it has to have 4 criteria accepted by the international community. And they are the ability to maintain and conduct international relations. Does the Palestinian Authority have that with Israel? No, it doesn't. It only has relations with terrorism. It has to have a permanent population. Well, maybe we can say, maybe they have a permanent population. It has to have a defined territory. My dear friends, not even the Palestinians themselves know how to define their territory. Actually, they do. They define their territory as all of the state of Israel. And a country has to have one government according to the Montevideo Convention. Okay, so we have the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, and then we have what in Gaza? We have Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. What is it we have in Gaza? Well, we don't know. So no, Palestine does not make up the criteria to become an independent state. Now, in spite of all this, United Nations decided in 2012 to accept the Palestinians as give them observer status in the UN. And so they're not a country, but they have observer status. Now, what does that give them together with the Vatican? It gives them the ability to be sit in on all the meetings, put forward suggestions for resolutions, etc. And since 2012, there has been a spike in all the resolutions against Israel. I mean, if you look at the UN, you think that there is only one country in the world, or actually maybe 10, and one of them is the villain, and that's Israel. Because the amount of resolutions is Israel just staggering. And that is what the Palestinian Authority has been doing since they were accepted. In spite of that, in the acceptance, it said that you cannot devote this time or your membership only to go after Israel. And that is exactly what they have done. So it violates the Oslo Accords. It violates the UN's own charter that will only accept peace-loving and state members that are willing to abide by UN obligations, and Article 80, that was the Jewish People's Clause. Now, we left Gaza in 2006. Actually, 2005, sorry. Israel left. We didn't give them the land, but we left. There was no Jewish presence. We took the dead. We even took up our dead. We didn't want to have any Jews in Gaza. Since then, Hamas won the election in 2006, the year after, and the year after that, they killed all their opponents. And since then, the Palestinian Authority has not been set foot in Gaza because they would be killed on the spot. So since 2007, Hamas has been building and preparing to build the terror infrastructure that attacked Israel on the 7th of October. And so people say, so how could 7th of October happen? And I say this together with others. 7th of October happened because there was a two-state solution. Because they had their own state. We did not stop them with anything. We had imposed certain things that could not go in there. Of course, they couldn't take in weapons but it was smuggled anyway. So 7th of October happened because there was a two-state solution. So I'm going to skip this. So have we given the Arabs an opportunity to get their own state? Yes, we have been willing to give land for peace. In 1947, in 1967, 2000, 2001, 2008, 9, 16, 2020, and now the last one. Actually, there was when Mahmoud Abbas said no to the 2020 plan, which was also President Trump, Donald Trump. I must say that we really like Trump here. Not everyone, but most of Israelis, they really like Trump here because he gets things done in the Middle East the way it's supposed to be done in the Middle East. So his latest peace plan, well, that is with Hamas. So it's not really with the Palestinian Authority. Actually, they are included. They're supposed to de-radicalize, but so far it's not working. So the Arab Palestinians have always rejected to get land for peace because they don't want that. They want Israel not to exist. That is their conflict. Now, so sometimes we're accused of killing children, and we do, because when children attack Israelis and kill Israelis, usually they get shot or killed on the spot. So what you see in this picture is this child lying here. He's 17 years old. This is in Jerusalem. He stabbed an Israeli soldier, and he was shot by security forces. He later died, and then he was eulogized by the Palestinian Authority as a martyr, as a hero, etc. This review I actually took today. It's Impact SE. They look at not only the Palestinian Authority, they look at many school curricula all over the world and how it functions when we talk about peace and terrorism. So the Palestinian, one of the major problems with UNRWA is that they buy their school material from the Palestinian Authority, and they have done so since the Palestinian Authority was created. And the Palestinian Authority school material is terrible. It's full of anti-Semitism. It's full of non-peace. It's full of jihadism. And it's just terrible material. And Israel has been screaming about this for years. And no one is listening, especially not in the UN, as UNRWA is part of the UN. So Mahmoud Abbas, he promised to do something about this terrible material. This was published last week. They have done nothing. They still incite their little children to become jihadists, to murder Jews, etc., etc. And how come they get so many people to murder Jews? Because the Palestinian Authority is the only so-called government in the world that has a salary list of what you get paid according to the how bad your crime is. So the worse the crime, the higher the salary. And this salary is much, much better than anyone employed within the Palestinian Authority. And what is the salary? It's the paid-for-slave salaries that are given to terrorists for murdering Jews. You get paid to murder Jews. And if you die in the action, your family will get rewarded for the rest of their lives with very high financial aid. And this financial aid is paid by you guys, it's paid by us, it's paid by Sweden, where I come from, because the Palestinian Authority doesn't have a functioning country with the They don't produce anything. They produce terrorism, and they get their money from donations. So we are donating our money to murdering Jews, and it's still going on. This has been going on since 2006. Soviet Union and communism, well, I'm not going to, the UN, International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, they are part of this anti-Semitic wave of which is steered by the UN and the EU as of lately. I'm making this quick. Amnesty International, a completely anti-Semitic. I used to like Amnesty International. I don't anymore. It's totally anti-Semitic and Jew hating and Israel hating, and it lies about Israel and comes out with fabricated reports. They did so in 2022, 24, 23, and it's just all fabrications. And the Amnesty International hired this wonderful little journalist out of the journalist. She's probably not a journalist at all, that reported out of Gaza. Now, this guy here, his name was Aman. Is Aman. He's a Gazan who actually believes in peace. And he had a Zoom meeting with Israelis in when was it? In 2020? Yes, and they spoke of peace. Because there were a few Gazans and there were lots and lots of Israelis. It was a very successful meeting. This woman here, Hind Khudari, she heard about it. She reported this peace activist to Hamas in Gaza, and he was arrested by Hamas, tortured by Hamas, and was released only because UN Watch, which is an organization that pro-Israel organization led by Hillel Neuer, he was campaigning, or they were campaigning for the release of Aman, and he was eventually released because it was so much pressure on Hamas to release him, and he, of course, then fled, and he now lives in other parts of the world. Now, the media. In this war that Hamas or Gaza, I should say Gaza, started on 7th of October, the media is our eighth front. We have a war with 7 war fronts stretching from Hamas to the Houthis in Yemen. And the eighth front is media. Media has lied, and just lately there was a BBC scandal, and they have lied about just about everything that comes out of Gaza, and they have taken Hamas words as proof. They have just repeated Hamas words as some kind of facts on the ground, rather than Hamas propaganda, jihadist propaganda against the state of Israel, with no shame and no pain. And we're talking about the BBC, CNN, Sky, etc., etc., all the major AP, all the major news agencies in the world, actually. Now, not only do they lie, they stage these photographs. Now, so Time magazine, they have this picture as the Gaza tragedy. And now let's look at what it really was. You see this picture here with this journalist. Now I want you to pay attention to this fence here. It's a red and white fence. It's the same red and white fence over here. These photos are staged, my friends. It's called Pallywood. Here we have the same fence, the red and white fence. The red and white fence, it's a bit harder to see here, but I see it clearly. And all of these photos are staged. They make headlines in the world all over. Now, so how come it's so bad in the UN and with the media? Well, first of all, the UN is, most of the countries in the world are dictatorships. They're not democracies. So 74% of the world's countries, more or less, are dictators, and they will, so whatever you vote on in the UN or resolutions, thank God, only resolutions, it will be decided by dictatorships. And here I have just a few examples. I have short of time, so I will just, these examples are from 2004, so it's not recent. I just want to tell you some of the UN organizations. So where is it? United Nations Disarmament Commission in 2004 was vice chair Iran, rapporteur Syria. Okay. The Commission of Social Development, North Korea. Commission of Sustainable Development in 2004, Sudan. Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, Libya and Russia. I mean, it's a ridiculous list, and it goes on. I just took the main examples here for you to see. I can skip this one. United Nations Human Rights Council. It sounds great. It's terrible. It's a terrorist supporting organization, a Jew-hating organization, and it hates Israel. So they have no respect for their own for human rights, as they say, and they actually elected Qatar as the human rights onto the Human Rights Council. Qatar has slaves, and they were on the Human Rights Council. Now, Francesca Albanese, she was the special rapporteur on Palestine. It's called now on the occupied Palestinian territories. It's terrible. I mean, they invent all these words. So she wasn't satisfied with all the anti-Israel resolutions that the human rights the human rights organization came up with. So she accused Israel, and this is for real. This is not unreal. This is for real. She accused Israel of a few other things: domicide, herbicide, scholasticide, medicide, cultural genocide, ecocide, etc., etc. You want to know what they are? I have no idea. Only Francesca Albanese will know what they are. But Israel was guilty of it. And this is real. These people get salaries from the UN to sit in organizations like this and blame Israel for whatnot. The flag of the Houthis, how can that even be accepted in the UN, in the world? You have a flag where it says the following: Allah is the greatest, death to the US, death to Israel, curse on the Jews, victory to Islam. That's the flag of the Houthis in Yemen. And the UN seems to be fine with that. Now, this is a private, a few things from the 7th of October. Actually, this is from the 17th of October, 10 days after the massacre. This is inside a kibbutz house in Kfar Aza, which is on the border to Gaza, and which was heavily attacked on the 7th of October, and it looks like this. 10 days after the massacre. Yeah. 10 days after the massacre, and the blood is still there. And our soldiers. Now, I want you to understand who are our soldiers. Who is the IDF? Who is the Israel Defense Force? It's our husbands, it's our parents, it's our sisters, it's our brothers, it's our children, it's our grandchildren. It's a family. It's a people's army. It's a family army of everyone has someone in the army in Israel. Now, no one in this house survived. And the people that were attacked, they were of all ages. But you can see the dummy here. And just to be terrible, the terrorist put this photograph of mom and dad's wedding on the table. Now, as I'm not in the army, I could not be a volunteer in the army. I'm volunteering on the border police, but not in the army. So I volunteered immediately for a group that did translations. A group of tour guides. We speak all kinds of different languages. And we translated witness statements. And we translated short social media clips and films taken by the terrorists themselves, because the terrorists, they documented everything they did. They were wearing GoPro cameras. They filmed everything. They filmed it with their own cameras. They filmed it with the victims' cameras, and they posted it on social media. Israel immediately created a special unit to document everything. And I feel sorry for the people who sit there and have to go through all of this. We are talking about hundreds of hours of horror that someone has to go through and translate. I translated a little bit. I cannot not see the things that I saw in these videos. They will stay with me forever. I cannot not remember the things I translated and I read. They will stay with me forever. But I could not volunteer. You had to do something. So 7th of October hit everyone in Israel. Every house was affected. Every family was affected. The lucky ones did not have people killed. The unlucky ones had people killed, because it's not only the 1,200 people that were killed on that horrible day, it's also the 900 soldiers that were later killed. And as I said, our soldiers are people, they're our family. Our soldiers are our family. And all the other civilians that have been killed in terrorist attacks since 7th of October and keep being killed because terrorist attacks, they continue from Judea and Samaria. We have a wonderful army, but they cannot protect us 100%. They do an extremely good job, but they cannot protect us 100%. So back to this movie. This is inside this house. As I said, no one survived. And when people were killed, they were killed one by one. So the rest of the family would see the suffering of the others. And they were hacked to death, piece by piece. No one survived in this car, and the cars with the children's seats and chairs full of blood. No one survived. They didn't give children, babies, there was like no concern. Anything that was Jewish was to die. Now, this attack was very organized. They had lists of the people who lived on the kibbutzim, because the Jews who lived on these kibbutzim, they were the left-wingers of Israel. They were the left-wingers that practiced their leftism by allowing the Gazans to come and work on their kibbutzim, by allowing them to get a better life, by allowing them to give them proper salaries. And the reward they got for this was murder in the most terrible and horrible ways. So the two-state, the idea of two states for two peoples, I think that idea is out of the window. It was thrown out of the window on the 7th of October. And personally, I hope it will never come back. How will it be solved? I have suggestions for that, but it's not a two-state solution. These people did not survive. And this is how the lovely young couple looked like. And I can tell you, according to the statements that I read and the witness and the movies that I saw, they did not die easily. They were tortured before they were definitely tortured before they were killed. No one survived in this area of the kibbutz. This is the area of the young people on the kibbutz. No one survived here. Some people were kidnapped and then later released either dead or alive. No one survived here. Now, you think this was horrible. It was the largest attack on Jews since the Second World War, since the atrocities of the Holocaust. But these types of atrocities, the only thing is the scale of the attack. That was unique. But these types of attacks have happened all the time. They've happened in history. I have a new upcoming book about anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. This goes back to the time of Islam. So yes, what you see here on the screen is an attack that happened during the Second Intifada. This specific attack was in 2003. Oops, what did I do here? I don't know what I did. 2003, I was working as a teacher at a school in Tiberias for people who wanted to become bakers and within tourism and stuff. And in one of my classes, I had this student, Salik. He is here. Now, his little son, he had two children, one a baby and one a 4-year-old boy. The 4-year-old boy, he had a birthday on Sunday, on a Sunday. Friday, which is Sunday is a regular day here in Israel. On the Friday, at school, Tzalik baked a cake for his son, and he left it in the fridge of the school because he was to, on Sunday, take it with him to his son that had a birthday on Sunday. Now on the Saturday, he went to a restaurant in Haifa together with his mother, himself, his wife, his 2 children to celebrate the birthday. In comes a young female suicide bomber. She situated herself next to the baby carriage of his baby and blew herself to pieces. And within one instant, she killed his entire family. The survivors of his family was his sister who was not there and his father who was not there. Together with Tzalik, 21 other people died, or 20 other people died, 21 all in all. Lots of people were injured. Now in the school, what are we going to do with the cake that Tzalik placed in the fridge? He baked it on Friday. Who's going to take the cake from the fridge? Who's going to have the guts to throw away the cake Tzalik baked for his 4-year-old boy? This is the reality that we live with. Now, this terrible intifada, it lasted for 5 years, and wherever you went, there were suicide bombers, there were children being murdered, it was just horrible. And it lasted for 5 years. Now, in 2011, 2 youngsters, 2 teenagers in, I think it was Samaria or Judea. I can't remember if it was Samaria or Judea. They decided to kill a few Jews. Why? Because you get paid by the Palestinian Authority to kill Jews. First of all, if you die, you become a martyr. And if you don't die, you become a hero. And you get paid. You have this wonderful salary whilst you sit in Israeli jail. So 2 teenagers, 19 and 17, went to this Fogel family's house in one of the settlements, a Jewish settlement, which is just Jewish presence, civilian presence in Judea and Samaria. And they killed, with the knives, they killed the mother, the father, 2 of the boys. Then they left the house. They had not seen the little baby, Hadass. But she started screaming. So they heard her when they were outside the house. They turned around and they cut her head off. 17 and 19 years old, they were cousins. When they were caught by Israel, by the Israeli army, because we are a moral army, they were not killed, they were captured and taken. Even these evil people, they're given a chance for a trial. So they were given a trial and they were given a lawyer to defend them. They laughed when they sat in trial and smiled. That is the type of people that we are dealing with. That is what the world does not understand. They don't get it because they don't believe evil exists this way. Now, evil exists this way because UNRWA, the UN, has incited the population for 5 generations since the end of the 1940s to Jew hatred, to kill Jews, to encourage martyrdom, to encourage the murder of Jews. It's absolutely despicable. So there's no wonder. I don't believe that people are born, some people they're psychopaths, they're born this way. The Arab Palestinians are sociopaths because they are educated this way. And it's the UN that does this education for them. So in summary, actually I can skip the summary. I just want to end this with saying, let them go, because we still have 3 murdered hostages that we need to release. Israel does not leave people behind. They will do everything they can in order to bring everyone home. Now, the 7th of October, I'm a tour guide. My husband, Motti, is a tour guide, as you know, Scott. it affected each and every one in different ways. So we became, of course, unemployed. We lost our jobs. I still don't have a job 2 years on. It has affected. 7th of October is a watershed. It will change. It will be the date that changed modern day Israel. And I have this philosophy that nothing bad without something good, and the other way around, nothing good without a little bit of bad. The good thing about this horrible, terrible thing is I can hope that Israel woke up to its reality, because I can tell you this, on the 6th of October 2023, Israelis were out marching and demonstrating in the hundreds of thousands against the government and the judicial reform that was on the table. Because Jews, they like to go out and show what they, Israelis, we are such a vibrant democracy that you can go out and we can agree on having different opinions, but we don't lose friends over that. We don't lose our jobs because we have different opinions. Everyone here has a different opinion. But we talk about it. And on the 6th of October, other nations, that is probably also one of the reasons Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, decided to attack. He thought Israel was weak. But when we are in need of each other, nothing will stop us. We are united as one. And when we are united as one, we are a force to be reckoned with. And that is how I want to end this a bit depressing lecture. There are many things to be done. And I think not only in Israel did we wake up, I hope parts of the world has also woken up. And I think they have. BBC was just exposed for its horrible bias since the 7th of October and before. The UN, the UNRWA has been exposed for its, UNRWA, most of the people in Gaza that work for UNRWA, they're Hamas. And so I think there will be changes. And I was going to say thank God, but I would say thank you to the American voters that we have President Donald Trump in the seat that can actually deal with these things, the things that the way they're dealt with in the Middle East, because this is the Middle East. We must not forget. We are not talking about Sweden and Norway, where we like to sit around a table and solve problems by talking. Thank God we have Mike Huckabee over here as well. It is wonderful, and Motti is so proud because he actually guided him a few times. So he is proud to say that he has guided Mike Huckabee as well. So I want to thank you very much for your time, and that was an hour and a half. It is. Yeah. True. Absolutely. Excellent. Is there any questions? Yeah, I can see. I can see. This was very quickly done. So thank you. Now, if anyone has any questions later on, I will be happy to answer them. We can correspond, and I can write or send a link or whatever. Yeah. Of course.